The morning sunlight filtered through the sheer curtains of their suburban home, casting a golden glow over the polished hardwood floors. Ethan adjusted his tie, glancing at his reflection in the mirror. The man staring back seemed older, wearier, and burdened by an invisible weight. For the past few months, his wife, Clara, had been distant. Not cold, but there was a subtle shift in her demeanor. A late-night text she didn't explain, unexplained errands, and a sudden penchant for privacy. Their marriage, once a partnership of shared dreams and spontaneous laughter, now felt like a strained performance. Clara, with her radiant smile and infectious energy, seemed to be living in a world he no longer belonged to. Ethan couldn't pinpoint when it started, but the quiet whispers of doubt had grown into an incessant hum. He tried to dismiss his suspicions. Maybe she was stressed, or perhaps it was the monotony of their routine. Yet, a gnawing feeling told him there was more to the story. One evening, Ethan sat alone in the dimly lit living room, scrolling mindlessly through his phone. Clara had gone out, citing an impromptu dinner with a friend he didn't know. Her laughter from a quick phone call still echoed in his ears, but it wasn't the sound he remembered. It was lighter, freer. On a whim, Ethan decided to check her car. He wasn't proud of his actions, but desperation had a way of eroding boundaries. In the glove compartment, tucked beneath a stack of receipts, he found a small device, a GPS tracker. His pulse quickened as he stared at it. Why would Clara need something like this? Initially, Ethan thought it was hers, perhaps something for her work as a real estate agent. But when he connected it to his phone and activated it, he realized it wasn't tracking any property or client. It was tracking Clara's car. He sank into the couch, the weight of the discovery pressing down on him. Someone had been tracking her, or worse, she had been tracking herself. A cascade of scenarios flooded his mind. Was she in trouble? Was she hiding something from him? Ethan couldn't sleep that night. The device sat on the coffee table, its blinking light a reminder of the unraveling mystery. He contemplated confronting her, but the fear of her reaction held him back. Instead, he resolved to use the tracker. If Clara was hiding something, this was his way to uncover the truth. The following day, Clara left for another supposed meeting. Ethan waited for her car to disappear down the street before opening the GPS app. A red dot marked her location, moving steadily away from their neighborhood. He stared at the screen, torn between guilt and determination. His mind raced with questions. What if he was wrong? What if his doubts destroyed the fragile remnants of their relationship? But the thought of not knowing gnawed at him more than the guilt ever could. Ethan grabbed his keys and followed the signal. The app updated in real time, showing Clara's route as she drove across town. He stayed a few cars behind, his heart pounding with each turn. The first stop was innocuous, a coffee shop. Ethan parked a distance away, watching as Clara entered and emerged moments later with a cup in hand. It seemed normal, even mundane, but something about her hurried demeanor set him on edge. The red dot moved again, leading him further away from familiar territory. Clara's next stop was a small boutique hotel on the outskirts of the city. Ethan's stomach twisted as he parked across the street, his mind conjuring every worst-case scenario. He watched as Clara walked inside, her figure disappearing behind the revolving doors. Ethan remained frozen in his car, gripping the steering wheel as his world teetered on the edge of collapse. He didn't know what he would find, but he knew there was no turning back. Ethan sat in his car across from the boutique hotel, his breath fogging the windshield as he struggled to keep his thoughts in check. The GPS app showed Clara's car parked in the lot, her location now marked as stationary. The realization sent a chill through him. This wasn't a casual stop. Minutes felt like hours as Ethan debated his next move. Should he go inside? Should he call her? A part of him hoped there was a simple explanation, but another, darker part whispered that he was about to uncover something he could never unsee. His phone buzzed, pulling him from his spiraling thoughts. It was Alan, his best friend and confidant, who had noticed Ethan's unusual behavior over the past few weeks. Ethan hesitated before answering. "Hey man," Alan's voice was calm, a stark contrast to the storm raging in Ethan's mind. "You sound off. What's going on?" Ethan took a deep breath and spilled everything. The late nights, the GPS tracker, and now Clara at the hotel. Alan listened in stunned silence before responding. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Alan asked. "What if you're wrong? What if it's nothing? And what if it's not?" Ethan shot back, his voice trembling. Alan sighed. "Look, I get it. You need answers. But don't lose yourself in the process. Just be careful, all right?" The call ended, leaving Ethan alone with his doubts. His friend's words echoed in his mind, but they didn't stop him from stepping out of the car. As he approached the hotel, the automatic doors slid open, revealing a sleek, modern lobby bathed in warm light. The air smelled of citrus and cedar, a stark contrast to the cold dread settling in Ethan's chest. He scanned the room, hoping to catch a glimpse of Clara, but she was nowhere in sight. At the front desk, a young receptionist offered him a polite smile. "Can I help you, sir?" Ethan hesitated. He couldn't ask outright about Clara without raising suspicion. Instead, he mumbled something about meeting a friend and moved toward the elevator bank. The GPS app still showed Clara's location as inside the building. As he waited for the elevator, a man brushed past him, carrying a duffel bag. Their eyes met briefly, and Ethan's stomach churned. Was this man connected to Clara? Or was Ethan's mind playing tricks on him? The elevator dinged, and Ethan stepped inside, his heart pounding as he pressed the button for the third floor. The ride was agonizingly slow, each second stretching into eternity. When the doors finally opened, he was met with a long, carpeted hallway lined with identical doors. Ethan followed the GPS signal, his steps growing heavier with each stride. The app led him to a door at the end of the hall. Room 312. He stared at the number, his pulse deafening in his ears. Before he could knock, a burst of laughter echoed from inside. Clara's laughter. The sound was unmistakable, but it wasn't meant for him. Ethan's hand hovered over the door, trembling. He could hear muffled voices now, hers and a man's, though he couldn't make out the words. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to storm in, but he couldn't bring himself to move. Instead, he stepped back, retreating to a corner where he could see the door but remain out of sight. His mind raced, torn between confronting her and gathering more evidence. He pulled out his phone and recorded a short video of the room number, the voices audible in the background. It felt invasive, but he needed proof for himself, if nothing else. After what felt like an eternity, the door opened. Ethan tensed, his breath catching in his throat as he watched Clara step out, followed by the man he had seen earlier in the lobby. They exchanged a few words before parting ways, the man heading toward the stairs while Clara walked toward the elevator. Ethan ducked out of sight, his mind reeling. Was it a business meeting? A casual rendezvous? Or something more? He couldn't make sense of what he had just seen, but the sinking feeling in his chest told him the truth he feared most. Back in his car, Ethan replayed the recording, searching for clues in the grainy footage. He noticed the man's hand linger on Clara's arm as they spoke, a gesture that felt too intimate to be innocent. His phone buzzed again, this time with a text from Clara. "Hey, just finished with my meeting. Heading home now. Want me to pick up dinner?" Ethan stared at the screen, his stomach twisting into knots. The message was so casual, so normal, as if nothing had happened. He wanted to scream, to demand answers, but he knew he wasn't ready, not yet. As Clara's car pulled out of the lot, Ethan followed at a safe distance. The GPS app continued to track her, each ping a reminder of the betrayal he was inching closer to uncovering. The drive home was a blur, his mind replaying the scene at the hotel over and over. By the time he pulled into their driveway, Clara was already inside, humming a tune as she unpacked takeout containers on the kitchen counter. Ethan watched her through the window, his chest tight with a mixture of anger, sadness, and disbelief. She looked so carefree, so unaware of the storm brewing inside him. For now, he decided to keep his silence. He needed more than a gut feeling and a few vague clues. But the weight of what he had seen, and what he feared, was already tearing him apart. The tension in the house was palpable. Clara moved through their shared space with practiced ease, her voice light as she chatted about her day. Ethan, however, felt as though he was a stranger in his own home, his mind replaying the hotel scene like a haunting melody he couldn't escape. That night, As Clara drifted off to sleep beside him, Ethan lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Her breathing was steady, serene, a stark contrast to the storm raging within him. The questions that had plagued him for weeks now felt sharper, more urgent. Who was the man? How long had this been going on? And most haunting of all, why? By the next morning, Ethan had resolved to follow her again. He didn't want to. He hated what he had become, suspicious, paranoid, consumed by doubt. But he needed closure, no matter how painful. The opportunity came sooner than expected. Clara claimed she had an afternoon meeting with a client across town. Ethan nodded, feigning indifference, but the moment she left, he grabbed his keys and opened the GPS app. The red dot reappeared, moving steadily away from their neighborhood. This time, Ethan felt a cold determination settle over him. He wasn't just following out a suspicion, he was chasing the truth. The tracker led him to a part of town he rarely visited, a secluded area on the outskirts with winding roads and dense woods. The destination was a cabin tucked away from view, its rustic charm almost picturesque. Ethan parked a distance away, his heart pounding as he approached on foot. The sound of birdsong mingled with the crunch of gravel beneath his shoes, a cruel reminder of the normalcy that surrounded his unraveling world. From behind a cluster of trees, he spotted Clara's car parked outside the cabin. Beside it was another vehicle, a black sedan he didn't recognize. Ethan's breath hitched as he crept closer, his every step measured and silent. The cabin's large windows offered a clear view inside, and what he saw made his blood run cold. Clara stood in the living room, her posture relaxed, a smile playing on her lips. She was speaking to the same man from the hotel. They were close, too close. The man reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face, and she didn't pull away. Ethan clenched his fists, his nails digging into his palms as he fought the urge to burst in. Instead, he crouched beneath the window, his breathing shallow. He wanted to hear what they were saying, even if it meant shattering his own heart. "You know we can't keep meeting like this," Clara said, her voice tinged with worry. "Then tell him," the man replied, his tone firm. "You deserve to be happy, Clara. We both do." Ethan felt his world tilt on its axis. This wasn't just an affair. It was a betrayal of everything they had built together. His mind raced, torn between confronting them and walking away forever. Unable to contain himself, Ethan rose from his hiding spot and stormed toward the door. His heavy footsteps startled the couple inside, and Clara's eyes widened in shock as she saw him through the window. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice barely audible. He pushed the door open, the wood creaking loudly as he stepped inside. The man stood protectively in front of Clara, his expression wary but unyielding. "So, this is what you've been doing?" Ethan's voice was low, trembling with suppressed rage. All those late nights, the meetings, the lies. It was all for him. Clara took a step forward, her hands raised as if to calm him. "Ethan, please, let me explain." "Explain?" he barked, his voice rising. "You've been meeting him behind my back for God knows how long, and you think there's an explanation that makes this okay?" The man interjected, his voice calm but firm. "Maybe you should hear her out." Ethan turned on him, his anger boiling over. "Stay out of this. You have no right to be here. No right to. This isn't about you." Clara's voice cut through the tension, sharp and commanding. "Ethan, please. I'm sorry you found out like this, but this isn't just a fling. I haven't been happy for a long time." Her words hit him like a physical blow. He staggered back, his chest tightening as the weight of her confession sank in. "What are you saying?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Clara hesitated, tears welling in her eyes. "I'm saying that I've been living a lie, Ethan. We've been living a lie. I try to make it work, but I don't love you the way I used to. I'm sorry." The room fell silent, the gravity of her words hanging heavy in the air. Ethan felt as though the ground had been pulled out from under him. The man placed a reassuring hand on Clara's shoulder, a gesture that only fueled Ethan's anger. He turned and stormed out of the cabin, the cold air hitting him like a slap to the face. Back in his car, Ethan gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. He wanted to scream, to cry, to lash out at the unfairness of it all. But more than anything, he felt hollow, as if a part of him had been ripped away. For the first time, he realized the betrayal wasn't just about Clara's actions. It was about the crumbling of the life they had built together, the shattering of the illusion he had clung to for so long. The drive home was silent and heavy, the weight of Clara's words pressing down on Ethan like a crushing force. His hands gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white as his mind replayed the scene at the cabin over and over. "I don't love you the way I used to." The words echoed in his head, each repetition cutting deeper than the last. By the time he reached the house, he felt drained, his body moving on autopilot as he stepped inside. The familiar surroundings offered no comfort. Every corner of the house reminded him of the life they had built together, a life that now felt like a lie. The photos on the walls, the shared furniture, even the faint smell of her perfume lingering in the air. They were all tainted by the betrayal. Ethan collapsed onto the couch, staring blankly at the ceiling. For hours, he sat there, unmoving, his mind a storm of conflicting emotions. Rage at Clara's betrayal, grief for the love they had lost, and a hollow ache where hope once resided. When his phone buzzed, he ignored it at first, but the persistent vibration eventually forced him to look. It was Alan, his best friend, calling again. Ethan hesitated before answering, his voice hoarse. "Hey, Ethan, I've been trying to reach you. What happened?" Alan's concern was palpable. "She admitted it," Ethan said flatly. "She doesn't love me anymore." There was a pause on the other end, and then Alan sighed. "I'm so sorry, man. I can't imagine how hard this is for you." "It's more than hard," Ethan replied, his voice breaking. "It's unbearable." Alan stayed on the line, offering quiet support as Ethan vented his emotions. For the first time in hours, he allowed himself to cry, the tears streaming down his face as he poured out his heart. The following days were a blur. Clara stayed at her sister's house, giving Ethan space to process everything. They exchanged brief, stilted texts about practical matters, who would take the dog, how they would split their finances, but avoided any deeper conversations. Ethan found himself replaying their relationship in his mind, dissecting every moment, every decision, every argument. Had there been signs he had missed? Times when she had tried to tell him she was unhappy? He thought about the late nights at work, the growing silences between them, the way her laughter had faded over the years. One evening, Clara called. Ethan hesitated before answering, unsure if he was ready to hear her voice. "Ethan," she began softly, "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. For everything. Sorry doesn't change what happened," he replied, his voice cold. "I know," she admitted, "but I need you to know that I never meant to hurt you. I didn't plan for this to happen. I felt so lost, so disconnected from myself. And from you." Her words stung, but they also rang true. Ethan had felt the distance between them growing, but he had ignored it, hoping it would pass. "What happens now?" he asked after a long silence. "I don't know," Clara said, her voice trembling. I think we need to figure out what's best for both of us. Maybe that means going our separate ways." Ethan's heart clenched at the thought, but he knew she was right. They couldn't go back to the way things were, not after everything that had happened. The news of their separation spread quickly among their friends and family. Some were shocked, others sympathetic. Ethan's parents were particularly devastated, having always adored Clara. "Are you sure this is what you want?" his mother asked during one of their phone calls. "It's not about what I want," Ethan replied. "It's about what's already happened. There's no fixing this." Alan, meanwhile, continued to be a source of support, encouraging Ethan to focus on himself and his own healing. "You've been through hell, but you're stronger than you think," he said during one of their conversations. Ethan tried to take Alan's advice to heart. He threw himself into work, joined a local gym, and even started seeing a therapist to process his emotions. Slowly, he began to feel like himself again, though the pain of Clara's betrayal lingered like a shadow. Clara, too, seemed to be moving on. Ethan heard through mutual friends that she and the man from the cabin were still seeing each other. The knowledge stung, but it also brought a strange sense of closure. One evening, as Ethan sat on the back porch with a glass of whiskey, he reflected on the lessons he had learned. Trust was fragile, love even more so. But despite the heartbreak, he realized he still had the capacity to heal, to grow, and perhaps one day, to love again. For now, though, he focused on the present, on rebuilding his life, one day at a time. The months following Ethan and Clara's separation were a time of profound change. What began as a painful reckoning with betrayal gradually evolved into a journey of self-discovery and healing. Ethan found himself navigating a life he hadn't chosen, but was determined to make his own. At first, the wounds were fresh, and every day felt like a battle. There were reminders everywhere. Her favorite mug still in the cupboard, the way the sunlight hit the empty side of their bed, the quiet absence of her laughter in the house. But with time, Ethan learned to reframe those memories. They weren't just symbols of what he'd lost. They were also a testament to what he'd endured. He leaned into therapy, finding solace in the process of unpacking his emotions. His therapist, Dr. Singh, helped him confront not only Clara's betrayal, but also the deeper patterns in their relationship that had contributed to its unraveling. Betrayal doesn't define you, Ethan, Dr. Singh said during one session. It's how you choose to respond that shapes your future. Those words became a mantra for Ethan as he rebuilt his life. He reconnected with old hobbies, woodworking, hiking, and photography, that had once brought him joy but had fallen by the wayside during his marriage. On weekends, he'd venture into the mountains with his camera, capturing the quiet beauty of nature. It was during one of these hikes that he realized something profound. He no longer felt weighed down by anger or sorrow. For the first time in months, he felt free. Clara reached out one evening, asking to meet. Ethan hesitated, unsure if he was ready, but curiosity and a lingering sense of unfinished business drew him to accept. They met at a quiet cafe, the air between them heavy with unspoken words. Clara looked different, more relaxed, but there was a sadness in her eyes that Ethan hadn't seen before. "I wanted to apologize," she began, her voice steady but soft. "Not just for what I did, but for how I handled everything. I should have been honest with you sooner." Ethan nodded, his emotions tempered by the time that had passed. "I've thought about it a lot, Clara. We both made mistakes. I should have seen the signs, should have asked the hard questions instead of assuming everything was fine." She blinked back tears. "You didn't deserve what I did, Ethan. I know that now." "I know," he said, surprising himself with how calmly the words came out. "But I also know we were both unhappy, and we didn't know how to fix it. Maybe this was inevitable." They talked for hours, not as husband and wife, but as two people who had once shared a deep connection. By the end of the evening, Ethan felt a sense of closure he hadn't realized he needed. "I hope you find happiness," Clara said as they parted ways. "You too," Ethan replied, meaning it. The meeting with Clara marked a turning point for Ethan. It allowed him to fully let go of the anger and resentment that had been holding him back. He realized forgiveness wasn't about condoning her actions. It was about freeing himself from their grip. In the months that followed, Ethan focused on creating a life that felt authentically his own. He started a small business crafting custom furniture, turning his woodworking hobby into a career. The business thrived, and for the first time in years, Ethan felt a sense of purpose. His social circle expanded as well. Through mutual friends, he met people who shared his interests, and while he wasn't actively seeking a new relationship, he remained open to the possibility. One day, at a local art gallery showcasing photography, he struck up a conversation with a woman named Lila. She was warm and witty, with a passion for storytelling that matched his own. Their connection was easy, unforced, a stark contrast to the strained interactions that had marked the final years of his marriage. As they exchanged numbers and made plans to meet again, Ethan felt a flicker of something he hadn't experienced in a long time: hope. Sitting on his porch one evening, Ethan watched the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. The past year had been the hardest of his life, but it had also been transformative. He had faced his deepest fears, confronted his pain, and emerged stronger. Betrayal had taught him the fragility of trust, but it had also shown him the resilience of the human spirit. He had learned to let go, to forgive, and to embrace the uncertainty of the future. As the first stars appeared in the night sky, Ethan took a deep breath and smiled. He didn't have all the answers, but for the first time in a long time, he was okay with that. The journey wasn't over, but he was finally moving forward, one step at a time.